All right, the final installment of Indiana Jones hits theaters this weekend. If you go, are you going to dial up disappointment or are you destined for a good time? Let's talk about it. All right, full disclosure, I really love the originals Indiana Jones films. I loved Raiders of the Lost Ark, really like Last Crusade, and I even like Temple of Doom for the most part. But when I went to go see Kingdom of the Crystal Skull about 15 years ago, I had my heart pulled out of my chest. That movie was just so amazingly disappointed. So going into this film, I went in very cautiously optimistic. I was hoping that they wouldn't make the obvious bad decisions they made in the previous, but I knew it wasn't going to be what we got in the 80s. Harrison Ford is 80 years old. And so I went in with those tempered expectations. And I came out of the theater overall fairly happy with what I got. I wasn't blown away, it wasn't amazing, but it was a decent time. This movie really has gotten a mixed review from fans and critics, and I can really understand why. There's some really good things about this show that are fun, and there's some things that are less than desirable, and some characters that I found really annoying. But we're gonna go ahead and get into all of that and talk about the good and the bad, and if you should go check out Indiana Jones. All right, before we get further into the review, let's talk about the parent content report. So for those that want to bring younger viewers, you kind of understand what type of content is in this movie and what's appropriate. First and foremost, it's an Indiana Jones movie, so let's talk about the violence and the brutality of the movie. This show is actually probably the least overall violent of all of the Indiana Jones movies, especially the ones from the 80s. It has the least amount of brutal kills. In the originals, we had all sorts of crazy things. We had people's faces melting off their bodies. We had big men that were chopped up by airplane propellers. We had several heads that are being cut off. This show doesn't have any of that. It has a decent amount of gun violence, and there's a decent amount of people that do die, mostly from guns, from falling off planes, trains, and automobiles. But generally speaking, this one is not nearly as grotesque or graphic as previous Indiana Jones films. So that's not a bad thing if you're bringing younger kids. In regards to actual language, the language has a lot of moderate PG-13 style language. It doesn't have any F-bombs and doesn't have some of the more harsh language that you would typically see in a PG-13 film. It has a lot of H words, a couple D words, things along those lines. So there's probably a dozen and a half curse words, but again, they're on the lower spectrum of the curse words, so not too bad. And Indiana Jones being 80 years old, there's no one-night stands. He's moved past that part of his life, so the sexual content is really non-existent in this movie. In regards to woke content, there's nothing that's overtly woke. There's a throwaway line about capitalism that throws capitalism in a negative light that's said by one of the characters, but that's about as much as it gets. The rest of the film is pretty woke free. So for overall, I would probably say kids that are 10, 11, 12 are probably good to go check this out. All right, when it comes to the things that I liked, I have to start with Harrison Ford. He really does a killer job with this role. He always has, and you can really tell that he cares about the character and he's not phoning this in for a paycheck, that he's really trying to do this character justice. And what he does physically at the age of 80 years old is pretty amazing. He does a lot of movement, some of his stunt work. You can tell there's a lot of stuntman and that there is some CGI stunt work that's in this, but a lot of the things he does himself, and it's pretty impressive. In addition to that, we have John Williams come back to do the score. And John Williams is my all-time favorite composer. And I mean all-time, not just movies. And so he does a killer job with the original, bringing back the original tones from Indiana Jones with some new stuff. So I really, really like that. As I said before, Steven Spielberg is not the director in this film. He's an executive producer. It's James Mangold, and he does a pretty good job, even though he doesn't have quite the same feel that Steven Spielberg has. But overall, it's a well put together movie. In regards to other things I like, they bring back a couple cameos from Indiana Jones legacy characters. We've all seen Sala in the previews. There's one other one that I'm not going to mention because it's not in the previews. And Sala is good in it, but he's not in it a ton. So I was a little bit disappointed there. But in regards to the action, there's lots of action scenes. They're fun. There's some good laughs. Overall, it's a fun movie. Again, if you have proper expectations, you're gonna have a good time. The last thing I want to talk about is the villain. The villain, played by Mads Mikkelsen, is really good. It's actually one of the most memorable villains in any Indiana Jones film. He just plays that type of a character so well. He's kind of cold and calculated and stoic, not very emotional. He knows what he wants to do and he's just going to set about doing it. And he doesn't care who gets hurt in the meantime. But in regards to the things that I like, that kind of bakes the cake. Okay, in regards to the things that I didn't love, the biggest thing I have to talk about is the female lead character. And I've seen a couple reviews and got some other feedback from people. This particular character is pretty universally not a big hit with most people. She is the goddaughter of Indiana Jones. She is the daughter of one of Indiana Jones' friends from World War II. And she is just kind of an annoying character. She's a know-it-all, she's arrogant, she's condescending, she's just not very likable. And so she's a protagonist and she teams up with Indiana Jones, but she's kind of a villain at the same time. She does a lot of things that are morally reprehensible and she doesn't have great motivations and she's really selfish. And so for the majority of the movie, I really didn't like this particular character. Towards the end, there's some things that she does and she comes around a little bit, but overall, wasn't my favorite for a team-up character for Indiana Jones. I think they could have done better and paired him with someone else a lot more likable. In regards to other things that I have critiques on, the film is a little anticlimactic. Indiana Jones films are traditionally known for having these big endings, that are big climaxes. And this one, it's not super disappointing, but it's not the climax that you would expect from an Indiana Jones film. It doesn't have that big awe factor at the end. And so just kind of know that going into this. And then I guess kind of lastly, and this is not a real big negative, but it's kind of more mixed. It's the idea that this doesn't have any real iconic scenes. All the other Indiana Jones movies have really iconic scenes that you really remember and that other movies kind of copy and become part of pop culture. This one has a lot of fun action scenes, but they're all kind of generic and there's scenes that you've seen before in Indiana Jones movies or in other movies, and they're not particularly great. They're good, they're not bad. A lot of them are more CG-ish. There's a lot less practical effects in this movie than there was in the previous Indiana Jones. And so just kind of know that. So it's a mixed bag. It's not great, but it's still fun. All right, let's talk about who should go see this movie. If you're a Indiana Jones fan and you temper your expectations, not expecting the originals, I think you should go see this. I think you should see it in the theaters. It's fun. If you're just a fan of adventure movies and you just want to go see a good popcorn flick on a holiday weekend, again, Indiana Jones is a fun one to go to. The people that are going to be frustrated with this are people that are really expecting the 1980s Indiana Jones. They're not going to love it. And people that don't like Indiana Jones in general, obviously, why are you watching this? Don't watch it. This is not the best one. One thing I will tell you is 5 years down the road, when I want to watch an Indiana Jones movie, I won't go back to this one to watch. I'll go back to Raiders. I'll go back to Last Crusade. I'll watch those ones. So this is a fun film, but I'm not sure if I'm going to watch it a lot. I'll probably watch it once or twice more with my kids, but it's not something that's going to be on a regular rotation for me. So again, it's fun but flawed. Just keep that in mind. Fun but flawed. So overall, let's talk about ranking. I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10. Again, it's fun. It's worth seeing if you're an Indiana Jones fan. Gives the character a decent send-off. Not as good as the send-off as we saw in The Last Crusade, but a decent send-off. And there's some things that are jewels here. So that's my thoughts overall. If you've seen the movie and you have your own thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. Give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you next week for more.